Welcome, everyone, to the DeCesare Group Podcast. I'm your host, Jim DeCesare, and I'm glad you're here. This is our 70th episode, so do us a favor and go subscribe to our YouTube channel that we added over the summer, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and you'll receive a notification every other Monday morning when the new episode drops. The DeCesare Group Podcast is a companion to our popular newsletter, Soki Economic Development and Business News, which you could subscribe to on our website, thedecesaregroup.com. It's a brief, comprehensive look at economic and business news right here in South Central Kentucky. Our guest this week is Ryan Dearbone. Ryan is the president of the Bowling Green Warren County NAACP. He is also a former television news reporter who now works as an assistant professor in the broadcasting department at WKU. Ryan and I share a passion for so many things: Hopkinsville, wrestling, running, and of course Hilltopper sports and WKU in general. So here's my conversation with Ryan Dearbone. Ryan, welcome to the DeCesare Group Podcast.
Glad to be here, Jim.
How you doing?
I am doing well. It's a good day to be out. It's not too hot, not too cold. I'm cool.
All right, there you go. You know, there's a lot of things we need to talk about. So let's first start about where you're from.
Yes.
Hopopolis, Hoptown,
I am
Hopkinsville.
From the mighty Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Uh-huh.
The center of, like you remember from the solar eclipse, the center of the universe.
That's it.
One day we were the center of everything.
That and that day in 1950 when the Martians landed in Kelly.
That is very true. So those are the two things we are known for. So yeah, and
I think it was the 50s.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Yeah. I wasn't around, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
Neither were you, so yeah.
But, you know, we talk about Kelly, Kentucky, which is in Christian County. It's right up 41,
yes,
north of Hoptown, and they even have a little makeshift UFO there.
Right, and they have the festival every year to commemorate what they think may have happened.
Yeah. Well, supposedly it did. So, anyhow.
Yeah.
So, you grew up in Hoptown. Were you a county or a Hoptown kid?
I was a county kid.
All right.
And see, my mom was a Hoptown.
Okay.
But I made sure to go to county because I
was she Hoptown or Kaufman?
She was Hoptown. Yeah, she was straight Hop.
Okay.
Was straight Hoptown. Yeah. Yes. Now I'm trying to think. One of my cousins went to Kaufman. But yeah. No, she was straight Hoptown.
That was before it was Hopkinsville High. So
yes.
and of course, you know, I've got some roots in Hopkinsville as well. So you and I have that in common, being in Christian, being somewhat from Christian County. And now we're both in Bowling Green.
Yes.
Just funny how things like that work out sometimes. But you had a career in TV news, both in Bowling Green. You worked with Amy. And did you work in Lexington too?
I did. I worked at WTVQ, yes.
Yeah. So what made you go into journalism?
I think it was always a passion of mine when I was a little kid. I liked to be nosy and know what was going on. Mm-hmm. I liked being in front of a camera or being in front of an audience. So those things kind of were things I was interested in. And I think it crystallized for me because one time my mom took me to the Kentucky New Era, just because I wanted to meet some of the journalist people there. And so Lowell actually was one of the writers there. And so Lowell took me around and showed me and talked to me about it. And he gave me a reporter's notebook and he signed his name on it. And I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And then I was just like TV because I'd watch, TV 43 and
Did you watch Amy on TV 43?
So that's why I knew her when I got up here. I was like, I remember her from when I was in Hoptown. And so I was just like, yeah, this is what I want. I want to do TV because I always had dreams of being, when I was a kid, it was like, I want to either be on the Today Show, be one of the anchors of the Today Show, or be on ESPN. Those were my two, either sports or news. But that was the dream. That was the goal.
Right, but you never worked at TV 43.
I did. I actually did. I went the summer of my before my senior year of college. I did an internship at TV 43. So I got to basically for that summer I was a reporter because they were short reporters.
Yeah.
So I got to be a reporter then, and then as soon as I graduated, literally before I graduated from Western, I got hired to work at TV 43. So I worked in the Clarksville Bureau. So
okay.
I worked there for about 6 months. And only reason I stayed so short of a time was because financially it just wasn't going to work for me. No. But it was cool to work in my hometown station. So
was it still a low power station when you were there?
Was still
so was
it
like W43 AG or something like that?
It was low power. I tell the story now because it's funny. Back then it was like that was the summer that gas prices really shot up. Mm-hmm. And so I was living in Clarksville or living just outside of Clarksville, working the Clarksville Bureau, all the stories around there. So I was having to, I was spending money like buying gas, like paying for gas, just like
rolling pennies.
Rolling pennies
broke.
I was broke.
Rolling pennies for gas broke. That's the old Jeff Foxworthy saying.
Oh, absolutely. I was broke upon broke, but it was cool because, we would have to do our stories, and then we would have to meet our producer from Hopkinsville to give him the tape so he could take it back to the station in order to put it in the system and have it ready for the Clarksville newscast.
All right, I got to ask, where did y'all meet?
That's the great. We would meet at a McDonald's parking lot that was about, I want to say it was about halfway between Hopkinsville and Clarksville.
Right.
So we would meet in the McDonald's parking lot, and it'd be every day. It almost looked like we were just like handing I'd walk up to him. Here's my scripts. Here's the little mini DV tape. He would take it, and I'd go back to Clarksville. He would go back to Hopkinsville, and it looked like it just looked so fun. It was like, if people knew that this is how they were getting their news, it was really at a McDonald's parking lot is how we were getting the news back and forth to them. It was just great.
All right, I know I cut you off, but anyhow, you're Clarksville bureau chief.
Yes, bureau of two.
Yeah. So who was anchoring back in those days?
That was when Eddie Owen had taken
Okay,
over. That's when Eddie was.
Eddie's a legend over
Yes,
there. He's an old radio guy that went into TV.
Yep,
and
I think he owned the station at that point. That's when he was
okay.
in ownership of it. So yeah.
So he owned. So it was right next door to the Kentucky New Era, and I don't know if you knew this, but I worked there as well.
Yes, I remember that.
So I was a technical director. I had a face for radio, but I would work. I would come in and I would work from 4 to 11. So I would do the news and then we would switch, do the UK ball games, whatever. And then from midnight to 6, I was on the air at the old Z100, which later became the Cool 100.
Yeah.
And then it later became the second Beaver.
Yeah. Oh man.
So
wow.
That was what I did for a full year, and then I got promoted to nights at the radio station, so I worked overnight at the TV station, and I did video production. Wow. And I did that for about a year, and then I finally made enough money because they put me on the morning show, and so I got to quit the TV station right before Amy started.
Nice. So you paid your dues.
I've paid my
dues.
You paid
your dues.
I worked one. I was telling someone the other day, I worked 1 year. It had to be probably 89 or 90. I worked a whole year without a day off from both places. I mean, I either worked at both or one or the other, but I never got a day off that whole year.
Wow.
That's character building right there.
That is
no life, no money. $3.35 an hour.
You were dedicated.
Yeah.
You were dedicated.
So.
Because you could have gone to Farrell's and probably made more.
Well, Farrell's was right next door, so I did go down there a lot because the studio was there on Main Street, so we could go over to Farrell's. I know we could go down this Hoptown rabbit hole and talk all day long, but anyhow, so you went into journalism and then came to BKO before you went to TVQ in Lexington.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So in BKO, you were a reporter mainly.
Yeah, so I was mainly reporter, did a little bit of anchoring, did a little bit of sports, but I mainly did news. A lot of my beats, I did a lot of city commission, a lot of politics. Did a lot, just general assignment reporting, which was always fun to me.
Yeah.
Partially because it's what I wanted to do and because I enjoy telling people stories and learning more about people, but also because I came to Western, and so it was different seeing Bowling Green in a lens as a journalist as opposed to, a dumb college student who came here just to get an education and have some fun. So it was cool telling stories and learning people and meeting people in a more professional capacity.
Well, that's awesome. And then on to Lexington, but you ended up coming back.
Yeah.
And so you were at WKU. I think you're donor experience.
Yep, donor experience officer. Yep.
So what's that mean? Beg for money?
Basically, put on a nice suit and ask for money as nicely as possible.
I got you.
Did that for about 6.5 years. That was cool too because as a journalist, you never know if your skills are going to translate into something else. And a lot of the skills that I picked up in journalism and broadcasting translated completely into philanthropy and fundraising because you're still storytelling, you're still asking the right questions and trying to connect with people. So I loved it. It was great.
That's awesome. And so you did that for 6 years, and then now you're in the School of Media and Communication. So what are you doing now?
So now I'm an assistant broadcasting professor.
Okay.
So I get to come full circle and go from the program that I graduated in, and now to be a professor to help students become really successful, great journalists. And it's just the most cool thing I could ask for.
Yeah. So, and how long have you been doing that now?
Been doing about 2.5 years now.
Okay.
So yeah.
And so you're full time at WKU.
Full time on the tenure track. God willing, in a few years I'll be a tenured faculty member. But no, I absolutely adore it. And we have so many. To say talented kids would be an understatement. We have so many smart and exciting kids just to watch the work that they're doing.
So clearly you're not working with the freshmen like I am.
I'm getting them to the point. Hopefully I'm getting them to the point when they graduate, they'll be like, but I mean, even our freshmen are phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, all right. I got to bring you into my class that I teach in the fall. But anyhow, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. All right, go ahead. So anyhow, but you're there. You're teaching. You've been there and you've done that. Not a lot of people can say that teach in the School of Communication and Media. So. Some, have just come up through academia, but you've actually been boots on the ground, and you know what it's like to lug a camera around and be a one-man band and do all that by yourself. So give me an example of what the kids are learning today when it comes to this, because when I was doing this, we were still using tape, literally, whether it's videotape or audio tape. There was no computers involved. Right. So now you've got a lot of different tools and techniques now where you never probably touch a tape ever.
Exactly. Well, I mean, the big things we're trying to teach our students is fundamentals that never have gone away, about being a credible journalist, about sources, making sure that you're using all your resources and using them as properly as possible. But then with the technology end of it, there's so many people that are not trained in the business that want to be journalists, that want to do this. How do you do it correctly? How do you use, like, if you're going to take your cell phone, let's say a crash were to happen on Scottsville Road. How do you take your cell phone, shoot the right footage, get the right interviews, get the audio, and be able to package that and still get that to your station or to your media outlet as quickly as possible, but to do it in an accurate and effective manner? Because I mean, I look at students now like, man, if I had the ability to use the stuff you have now, I don't know how I would have gotten out of the business. Because if you could just take your cell phone and do a live shot, just put your little ear pod in, do a live shot, because they can zoom you in or live or whatever. That's a game changer. So teaching them how to use that stuff correctly and how to really enhance what they're doing that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we hear a lot in the news today. I don't know if I should say news, but you hear a lot today that to some extent journalism isn't what it used to be. A lot of times, if it shows up on social media, it's news, even though it might not be news. Right. So how do you overcome that hurdle, especially with a generation that has been on social media their whole life?
Right. So a lot of it is in the classroom. I challenge them to tell me what is actually news. Yeah. And what's actually newsworthy about something. Because you've got so many chefs in the kitchen that are trying to tell us what is news. Right. As a journalist, you need to be able to decipher it. And if you can decipher what news is, then you can accurately tell an audience. And you can say, okay, this is why this story matters, why this is newsworthy. This is not spin. This is not anything else. But this is a story that affects your community, that affects your livelihood. And this is why we're telling you the story. And it's a big hurdle because of so much, thought about the media these days. But I truly believe true journalists and good journalists will always overcome that.
Yeah. Do you expose them to like Walter Cronkite? Yes. That's the way it is on, whatever date it is. And who was the other guy? Paul Harvey.
I've talked to him about Peter Jennings. Yeah. Because I talked to them. I'll mention to them, especially like his coverage during 9/11. I remember watching that. Yeah. And I was like, when I was looking, I was like, that's what I hope that, never have to be in that circumstance, but the poise, the ability to storytell, to be able to, even though he was losing it because of what was going on, he was able to keep his composure and tell the audience what they need to know. Stuff like that is what I hope that they take away from it. So more so than the quick edit journalism, but okay, this is what true journalism looks like, and here's how you can do it.
It's interesting you mentioned 9/11 because I was actually on the air that day.
Oh, wow.
I was on radio doing my morning show at WGGC, where this podcast airs on Sunday mornings. But we're sitting there, we're doing our thing. We always had the TV on in the studio, just in case something did happen that we need to inform our listeners about. Now, clearly, I wasn't a journalist; I was more entertainment.
Right.
But, I kind of went into journalism mode at that moment, not really knowing a lot other than what I was seeing and being able to tell that story on the air. And then what we did for the next several days is we basically carried network feed because people were wanting the news. They were information hungry, wanting to know what was going on because, it was a tragic events that happened that day that impacted a lot of people and it impacted this country. So I think that day, you mentioned Peter Jennings being on the air and it was literally anywhere there was media folks, whether you were on a radio station playing music or you were on a news station, it was all hands on deck.
Oh yeah, I was a freshman when that happened, so I remember watching it. I was like, looking back now, like, how would I have covered that had I been in a position to do it? Because that's the stuff you can't account for, and a lot of this, and I try to tell the students that too. A lot of things that you see are, they're things you think about, but what happens when breaking news like that happens? That's so impactful. How do you cover that, and how you do that in the best and most I guess respectful ways possible? Yeah,
because that's the thing. There were a lot of unknowns at the time. Who did this? We really didn't know at first.
Right.
But we knew a lot of people had died that day, and you got to be sensitive to that because there are people that are grieving, not just there at those separate events, but they had people all over the country. So
absolutely.
Anyhow, that's interesting you talk about that, but what are you doing differently today when you teach that they weren't doing when you were a student?
I think
because everything's changed.
I think what I'm doing different is the fact that now it's so much easier to pull up on your computer. You could pull up footage of something. So back then, my professors, they had their videos of things that have happened, but they couldn't necessarily, like, if something happens today, I could show it in class tomorrow. I could pull it up on YouTube. I can go. Right. I can use so I can use stuff that happens immediately. Whether
back then you had to roll the TV in and throw in the.
You'd be like, okay, well, I bought a newspaper that said something about it, but you can't really show it. I could show it in real time. So, for example, I guess it was a year or two ago when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock.
So the slap heard around the world.
Literally, I was like, I didn't want to be like Salomon, but like, this is perfect for my process class that talks about the process and effects of media. Came in the next day. We talked about. I played it and we talked about it, and we were able to actually understand what this looks like in a media context.
Yeah.
How would you write the story? Is this really newsworthy? What makes it newsworthy? So being able to have that immediate, real-time, quick response, I think is something that I would have loved to have had back as a student, but it just wasn't possible. So now I make sure that I want students to see living examples of it as quickly as possible because, our attention spans are short.
Yeah.
If they're able to something happened last night, if they're able to key in on it today, they're going to remember it a lot easier and a lot more effectively than something 2-3 months ago.
Right. And of course, showing it within 24 hours, there was still a lot of speculation of whether or not it was real or not.
Right. Right. The students didn't know. So it was like, okay, since what do we know? What do we not know?
Yeah.
How do we attack this? Because you could be found liable if it was if it was fake and they were just playing it off.
Yeah. And you reported it as real,
right.
Which it was at the end of the day. I mean, it was real, but yeah, those are things that sometimes getting the just the facts, man.
Right, exactly, and get them correct and get multiple sources.
Yeah. So do you think there's some gaps in journalism today where they don't source as well as they used to? I mean, credibility is everything in journalism, and whether when you look at politics in journalism, either side, there's a bunch of lunatics out there.
Right.
So how do you teach kids to discern what's credible and what's not?
I tell them because, we live in such a microwave society. Some people think getting one source is enough. You need at least 2 or 3 sources, and they need to be credible sources. Yeah. A lot of people, and I use a lot of different examples, but sometimes they think the race to be first means you got the story right. You can get the story first and be dead wrong.
Yeah.
I used the Kobe Bryant crash as an example. TMZ got the story first. They got it like within an hour or 2 of the crash happening, but they got the important details about who was on that plane wrong. NBC, CBS, everybody else came in 3 or 4 hours later. But by the time they came in, the story had been fleshed out. They knew who was on the plane and who wasn't.
But all those networks, more than likely, and I don't remember all the details, TMZ's reporting.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
That's where a lot of the problems lie.
That is true. That is true. That they relied on somebody else rather than doing this. They went back and did their calls later. So no, you were dead on that. And so it's those things. It's like when something happens, can you say, well, I talked to witness one or person or expert? Can you say that? Or did you get it from somebody that you know is reputable? Because who knows? And in the microwave society we live in, a lot of the stuff that we hear is regurgitated from this person that's 5 people away from the person that said they said it.
Yeah.
And if you buy that, then you're no more than selling propaganda. We need to be above that. We need to do our checks and balances. That's what our job is. And if we can't do checks and balances, we don't need to be in the business.
And I think that's the problem a lot of people have with news today is that, when an NBC, ABC, CBS, whoever, CNN, Fox, whatever, and they're going TMZ's reporting. Yeah. Well, you're just throwing fuel on the fire. Yeah. Why don't you go out and do your own reporting? Yeah, exactly. Because everybody knows TMZ is really kind of a tabloid type situation, right? And they're looking for the juice. Yes. They're just trying to get clicks on their websites and on their social media, right? Because that's what their sponsors want.
Exactly. That's what brings in the money.
Yeah,
that's what brings in the money.
So and that's one of the things that's just been unfortunate about especially with social media and all these things. Because we are such a we're living in a dynamic now where we want information as soon as possible. Yeah. Whether maybe we don't want to let the facts get away with a good story sometimes.
Right. And sometimes it's more fun to speculate. It's more fun to say, well, I think I know the real meaning of this or whatever. Let stories play out. Yeah. Because for years, before social media, stuff like that, we had to wait till the 5 o'clock news, 6 o'clock news, something that happens.
We had to wait till Walter Cronkite came on.
Exactly. And by the time he got it, you could rest assured 9 times out of 10 he was correct because every box was checked in the process of gathering that story and putting it together.
That's why they call him the most trusted man in journalism. Yeah. So anyhow, who would you say is, when it comes to journalism today, what are credible sources?
I would say I always look to the AP. Mm-hmm. I feel like the AP is, to me, one of the Reuters and the AP are probably the most trusted. I look at, things like PBS and a lot of those stuff that's NPR. On there, NPR, because I don't get a sense that they're trying to do anything for, their listeners or their readers or their watchers are going to be who they are. They're not trying to get a grab of, we're going to get a new audience here by saying this, doing that. They go through the processes, and that's why a lot of stations go to them. Yeah, we'll pull stuff from the AP because we know the AP isn't trying to sell us anything. They're trying to tell you, here's the facts, here's what they are. From there, you do with it what you need to. Yeah, yeah. So those are the ones I tend to.
Yeah, and I look at the Wall Street Journal. I checked it. I think I consider them pretty credible. You're right on AP. I got their app on my phone because it's always going to be just pretty much the facts. Right. And then NPR depends on when you're listening, but most of the time on the actual news at the top of the hour, you're getting the news. Right. Now when you get into the programming, it might have a spin on it a little bit, but But as far as, right top of the hour, or actually it's at 1 minute past the top of the hour.
Very true. Yes. That's when you get the actual
You get the
news.
national news, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, over the summer, you attended the National Association of Black Journalists Conference. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that was cool.
Was that the one where Trump was?
That was.
Were you there?
I was in the room. I was there. It was a long line.
You noticed how I greeted you when you came in, right?
Yes. It was a very interesting situation, and it was good because I've been to the conference before, and it's always good to be around other journalists and pick up, tricks of what people are doing, how to be a better journalist, and especially because I always go to bring stuff back to my students.
Right.
So it was very interesting being in that room because, having been out of it and on a daily grind, I forgot, how quickly the news cycle moves, and with it being aired live, by the time we came out of that room, it was already, there were journalists.
It was old news.
It was old news because journalists were already writing stories as it was happening in real time. But then just to walk out, it's like, I looked at my phone, I was like, oh yeah, this is the new news cycle. This wasn't like this 10, 15 years ago when I was in the business. It would have taken a few hours for stuff to move. So I was like, it was a good education for me, and I can tell my students now, I was, in the middle of breaking news as it happened, and here's how I went about covering it, just writing stuff for myself and for other little places. This is how it works. And and from there, the rest of the conference, we were able to, decipher it, talk through it, and educate ourselves better. Because there's like thousands of journalists there, and we were able to look at that. Okay, how does that fit into what we're trying to do as journalists, and learn and be better at being journalists? So, yeah, it was great. I loved the conference.
So anyhow, and you were part of a historic moment there as well.
Exactly. I knew one way or the other it was going to be historic. So let me be in the room so I could see history in the making.
Yeah. So anyhow, you were there. So segueing to some of the other things that you do, you are the president of the Bowling Green Warren County NAACP. Now, is it a chapter?
Yeah, it's a chapter, yeah.
It started, the Bowling Green chapter started in 1919?
Yes.
That is a long time ago.
Yes, so we are...
I mean, if you think about the history,
right?
That had to have been not easy back in 1919.
No, especially in a place like Bowling Green, Kentucky, because, the national NAACP was started in 1909.
Okay.
So we're 10 years younger than the actual organization itself.
Yeah.
And so we've had a couple of periods of dormancy, but
Sure.
for the most part, the fact that there was an NAACP chapter, we're over 100 years old now. That's to me amazing that that we've been able to sustain, but then it speaks to the importance of the work that we do.
Yeah. So and I there's no such thing as a dumb question, but someone might not know what NAACP stands for. Well,
so it's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
There you go.
Yeah. And I mean,
I had most of it right.
Yeah. And it's a mouthful, but it's a great organization.
Not affiliated with the NCAA.
No, we've been confused with the NCAA, but we're not affiliated with them.
So how long have you been associated with the NAACP of Bowling Green and Warren County?
So I've been associated about 16 years now. I'd say roughly about 15, 16 years, and I've been the president for the past 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you all do a lot of different things, like you have political forums. Talk about some of the activities that you're involved with.
So we have, like you mentioned, political forums, so we'll have them again this year because we want to make sure that candidates and the community get a chance to connect with each other. We have a Freedom Fund Gala that we do every year to honor people in the community that are doing things, as well as give scholarships to graduating high school seniors to help them along their way. We do a lot of things when it comes to civil rights. So basically, if somebody has a civil rights issue or complaint, they just want to be heard, they come to us. We'll see what we can do to help them if there's a civil rights issue. We like to make sure people are educated.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things in the community that people don't necessarily know about, and we want to be able to make sure we're a clearinghouse for information. A lot of people will ask, so what do you do when there's not like a big fire going on?
Right.
We're just working to make sure that hopefully those fires don't happen.
Yeah.
We're trying to talk to people, educate people, and make sure that whatever we can do to make sure that these if there's a question, if somebody has a question about, is this discriminatory? We'll answer that question as best we can. So just to make sure that big fires don't happen because our community is such a great community. We don't want fires of misunderstanding or discrimination or stuff like that to happen if we can at all help it.
Yeah. So, I always remember a couple of things growing up in Christian County.
Yeah.
They had the first black sheriff in Kentucky, right?
Bill Dillard.
Yeah.
He's a distant cousin of mine.
Oh, really?
Yes, he is.
Awesome.
Yep.
So, you look at things like that, and I mean, and I can also say this because my aunt worked in the courthouse, but I do remember as a little kid, so this would have been in the 70s, that, there was still a segregation, even though segregation was over.
Yeah.
As far as using facilities, the signage was still there.
Right.
You could see where it used to be.
Yeah.
And it's kind of those are head scratcher things because now we have generations that don't know any of that.
Right.
But there's still bad things going on sometimes, and that's where your organization comes in.
Yeah, and it's hard because kind of like you mentioned, we're several generations removed from certain things like Jim Crow laws and segregation, but there are other things that are going on that people need to be aware of. It's like, okay, hey, there's a difference between discrimination and a misunderstanding.
Right.
There's a difference between whether it's ageism or sexism. What do those look like? And if you are being subject to that, what are the steps that you could take to empower yourself? So it's always one of those things of understanding, because I think, honest to God, I've told people 1,001 times, a lot of this comes from misunderstandings or not understanding and not taking the time to understand each other. And hey, we're different. I can celebrate your differences from me. If we just did that, everything would be fine. We get on our own heads and we won't do that. But if we just could for just a minute, we could eliminate so much of this stuff.
Well, and working with young people, I tell them that usually 90%, probably 99% of the time, when there's an issue, it all comes down to a breakdown in communication.
Absolutely.
And that's usually where the problems always start.
Yep, absolutely.
And then, it just snowballs from there.
Absolutely, 100%.
So anyhow, well, that's great, doing that for so many years and being involved and, giving back to your community and being a part of your community. I know that it is something that you're passionate about, and we'll talk about running, for example, because, you and I, we run a little. I think, where did we run? We were together. Oh, we were at the mud run.
We were at the mud run.
We were running together.
we look like, was it two getaway guys like what, oh, brother, where art thou? We're trying to get away.
Yeah, we were just at the back of the pack there, just trying to hang on, but we finished. And But you and your girls, your wife and your two girls, you're all runners, and you started a run, the Jackrabbit Run. You have one here in Bowling Green and one in Hopkinsville. Tell us about that and why you do it.
So we started the Jackrabbit Jog back in 2016. Initially, it was to raise money for Polycystic Kidney Disease Foundation, which at the time my grandfather and my uncle had both passed away from. My mom had it, but she was still alive. So literally a couple months before the first race, she passed away from PKD. So the goal of the race has always been to raise money and awareness for PKD, because it is a genetic disease, but it's a disease that affects, I believe, it's 600,000 people in the United States, over 1 million people worldwide.
Wow!
And so
that's a very small percentage.
It's a small percentage, and the thing about a lot of people don't know that they have it till it's too late.
Yeah.
So my goal was always to raise awareness, to where we could raise awareness and raise money, so that way one day we'll be able to hopefully eradicate it, so that way nobody else in my family, we've counted it back, I think about 4 generations of people that have PKD. I've got a cousin who currently lives with it.
And what is it called again?
So polycystic kidney disease.
Okay.
And so the hope has been to raise money for that, and then we also have the Hoptown race, which is basically the same thing. But then with that also, I started a scholarship at WKU in my mom's memory to help students from Hopkinsville, where if they want to be broadcasting or nursing, which she did nursing. So part of the funds go to her scholarship, and part of it goes to the PKD Foundation.
That's awesome.
So it's something.
And that's another thing we have in common. I think we were both raised by single moms. My mom was a nurse. Your mom was a nurse. My mom was from Hoptown. Your mom was from,
we're just like connected.
Yeah, that's right. So we went to different high schools together. I mean,
exactly. But I'll tell you what, me and you, we're connected because, like I said, the mud run, neither one of us were going to win it.
No, we weren't. The goal was to finish.
Exactly, and we finished, and we
not
were doing it,
not break anything. So
absolutely,
that's what it's all about. But I had fun hanging out with you that day, and so all right, now let's get on to the important stuff here.
Okay.
All right, so I kind of teed you up, and I know you're a wrestling fan.
Absolutely.
I'm a wrestling fan. So, top 5 pro wrestlers.
Okay, and see, the thing about it is there's so many different levels and layers to it. So I'm gonna give you my top 5 in no particular order.
Okay.
The Rock.
Okay.
Mick Foley.
All right.
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
All right.
And people are gonna jump on me for this one, but The Miz.
Okay.
And then I gotta go Hulk Hogan.
So you went all WWE on there.
I went all WWE because I'm a WWE kid. I mean, I watched WCW. I watched some of the new wrestling now, but I mean, if I look at the guys who was like just mesmerized me, it's those guys. And I know people will say, "Why The Miz?" I met The Miz literally like when he had just started WWE, and I followed his talk about we're kind of connected. He's married. He's got 2 little girls. Mm-hmm. We're kind of traveling in the same circle. So he's like plus he's the wrestler I would like to be if I was a wrestler. Either him or The Rock were the 2 guys that if I could have been a wrestler, those are the 2 guys I would have been.
All right, I would have been Jimmy, the mouth of the South Heart, too. Just give me a bullhorn and a cane.
I met him one time. He's real cool.
Yeah.
He is awesome.
All right, I'm going to give you my top 5. And they change all the time. Of course, you got to go with the Nature Boy.
Oh, yeah, Flair.
And so let me back up. So, I grew up some in Hoptown, but I also grew up in Florida. I spent a lot of time as a kid in Florida, and I grew up in Tampa Bay. So every Tuesday night, I think it was Tuesday night at the Tampa Bay Armory, the Tampa Armory, they had NWA wrestling with Gordon Soley. So Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes. I'll go Stone Cold.
Okay,
I'll put him in there. Barry Windham.
Yes,
and there's about 500 people for number 5.
Yes.
Right now, one of the guys I always like to watch, and he actually became a booker for the WWE, was Dean Malenko.
Oh, the man of 1,000 holds.
That's right. He was fun to watch, and he was just always no personality really. He just went into the ring and did his thing.
Yeah.
But there's so many great wrestlers that we could talk about.
I was thinking like, should I put Miz in or Bret Hart? Because Bret Hart's
good, but so was Arn Anderson.
Yes, that's true.
So the Enforcer. And it's good watching like AEW and seeing some of these old school guys back.
Yeah.
I think what's his name? What's his name, Justin? I'm drawing a blank here. But anyhow, the guy that's in a band.
Oh, Jericho. Chris Jericho. Oh yeah, Jericho.
Well, he's one of the great ones.
He is. He is. He doesn't get enough credit. I will say he does not get enough credit for the longevity and the peaks of his career. He has not gotten enough.
So that's good. And Harley Grace, people.
Oh yeah.
Harley was, of course, he was older, and he handed the torch off to Flair, and of course Dusty was in during that time, and they felt like he needed to own the title, so he did for a few times. But the Nature Boy, always the ultimate heel for the most part, and fun to watch.
Yeah, he's probably definitely one of the best characters ever. Just character-wise, just. Yeah, nobody better. All
right, so you may be my guest today, but you actually have a podcast too, right?
I do.
So tell us about it.
So it's called Church with No Walls. So basically the premise of the podcast is during the pandemic, I'm the media minister in my church, and I was very curious about how a church is surviving without, without being in the building. They have to use social media. They have to do live streaming. So I started thinking about how could we I find out and how can I tell this story? So I started reaching around, researching, got into a civic imagination incubator at WKU, and from there I started working on a podcast. So I'm about 15 episodes in. It's going to be a limited run because I don't think it's going to have, right now I don't know how long I want to go with it, but right now it's 15 episodes. But the beauty of it is I've been able to interview a man who literally has no physical church. He has a virtual only church.
Really?
Yeah. I've interviewed a woman who lives in Atlanta, but she's a member of a church here in Bowling Green. I've interviewed people who physically can't go to church, so they are now virtual members of churches in their own town. Mm-hmm. I've been able to interview so many different people and see what pastors about how they've had to deal with coming into a hybrid situation. What did it look like during the pandemic when they had nobody in the room? How have they adjusted what they do in order to not only talk to the audience that's in the sanctuary, but the audience outside of it? What does that mean when it comes to tithing and offering? What does that mean when it comes, are they buying equipment? Are they like, okay, we're good where we're at? What about churches that died off because they didn't want to?
Yeah.
To adjust and move. So, and I always ask them, what do you think about brick and mortar churches? Are they going away? Are they going to always be there? I've gotten different answers. I've heard some people say, no, they're going to die off. I've heard some people say, no, they're going to last. They're going to be smaller, but they're going to be here. So it's been cool to really delve into that different topic and from different religion standpoints too. Just different religions are thinking different things.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's interesting, and I guess just like with anything, you think about, I think about when I was working at TV 43, we carried a church broadcast on Sundays, and it was usually a week late or whatever. And there, I think a lot of TV stations still carry some church broadcasting, but, during the pandemic, a lot of churches pivoted and invested in, a camera and started streaming on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. And then they're still doing it,
right.
Because there are people that maybe grew up here and their home church, they may live in another city, but they like watching their home church on TV now,
exactly,
or YouTube or Facebook or wherever. And so the dynamic has changed just like it has with a lot of things.
Yeah. And for some churches, they said it was survival. They were like, we knew if we didn't adapt, we were going to perish.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's interesting. So a church with no walls is the name of the podcast, and you can get it on all the platforms.
All the platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, and anywhere you get your
it's the same places you get the TDG podcast.
Exactly. So listen to yours first, then stop on by mine.
Yeah, there you go. Now, just so you know, you were episode number 70.
Ooh, wow.
So we've been doing this for a hot minute.
Man, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get to 70 episodes, so mine might stop after a little while. But yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
70.
So cool. You're episode number 70, and Ryan, thanks for being on the DeCesare Group Podcast.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks again to Ryan Dearbone, president of the Bowling Green Warren County NAACP, for joining us this week on the DeCesare Group Podcast, and thank you for checking us out. Hey, if you like what you hear, please share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review and share your feedback with us as well. You can also follow the DeCesare Group across all of our social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and now YouTube. The DeCesare Group Podcast is produced by the DeCesare Group, a public relations and consulting firm based in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Our engineer is Justin "You Can't See Me" DeCesare, with content contributions from Brooke Mattingly and Amy DeCesare. I'm Jim DeCesare, and join us again next time for the DeCesare Group Podcast.